Her A1C was 8.4. She had been on metformin for 11 years. 11. Every 3 months, the same story, the same disappointing number, the same look on her doctor's face, the same adjustment to the dosage. Then she did something her doctor never suggested, never even mentioned. She added one vegetable, every morning for 90 days straight. When she walked back into that office, her doctor pulled up the lab results, went quiet for about 10 seconds and said, and I am quoting her directly, "This does not make sense." Her A1C had dropped to 6.1. Now, I am not going to tell you that okra is a miracle cure. It is not. Nothing is. But what I'm going to tell you, what peer-reviewed clinical research now confirms across multiple randomized controlled trials, is that this vegetable does something inside your body that most people, including most doctors, have never had explained to them. The communities with the lowest documented rates of type 2 diabetes ever recorded, the centenarian populations of Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Okinawa, Japan, have been consuming this vegetable, or its close biological equivalents, as ordinary daily food for generations. Not as a supplement, not as a protocol, just as part of the meal. The Nicoya Peninsula is the only blue zone in the Western Hemisphere. Okra is a dietary staple in traditional Nicoyan cooking, eaten in soups, stews, and rice dishes for centuries. The Okinawan equivalent is Goya, the bitter melon, which operates through mechanisms so similar to okra that researchers studying both populations have noted the overlap directly. These populations were not managing blood sugar. They never developed the blood sugar problem in the first place. I'm going to show you exactly why, through 5 specific mechanisms, ranked from the least powerful to the most powerful. And I promise you, by the time we reach number 1, you will understand why a vegetable that costs under $2 has decades of traditional use and an expanding body of peer-reviewed clinical evidence behind it, and almost no pharmaceutical interest in funding further research. Stay with me until mechanism number 1, because that is where everything changes. But first, what the mucilage actually is. When you slice open an okra pod, that sticky substance is not a flaw, it is the medicine. That mucilage is a complex polysaccharide matrix containing galacturonic acid, galactose, rhamnose, and arabinose, bioactive compounds that physically interact with the lining of your small intestine, altering how your body processes glucose at every meal. The seeds inside the pod contain flavonoids, specifically isoquercetin and quercetin 3-O-gentiobioside, compounds shown to directly inhibit the enzymes that break carbohydrates into glucose. The outside slows absorption, the inside blocks conversion. No single diabetes medication does both simultaneously. Let us go through the 5 mechanisms. Starting with number 5, mechanism 5, the antioxidant shield. When blood sugar runs chronically high, even moderately high, it generates oxidative stress. Free radicals attack the walls of blood vessels. They damage the capillaries in the kidneys, the nerves in the feet, the tiny vessels supplying the eyes, the numbness, the dry cracks, the vision changes. These are not simply aging. They are oxidative damage driven by glucose, accumulating over years. Okra contains multiple classes of antioxidants operating simultaneously: quercetin, catechins, epigallocatechins, myricetin. A review published in Food Production, Processing, and Nutrition in 2025 confirmed that okra's polyphenolic compounds suppress inflammatory cytokines, specifically tumor necrosis, factor alpha, and reduce the oxidative stress markers that drive diabetic complications. The quercetin glycosides in okra do not simply neutralize free radicals in the bloodstream. They protect the mitochondria inside kidney cells, reducing hydrogen peroxide generation within the mitochondria themselves. That is not cleaning up the damage after it occurs. That is preventing the damage from being generated in the first place. For the centenarians of Nicoya, who had been eating okra in their daily meals for decades, this mechanism was operating continuously, keeping the inflammatory and oxidative burden chronically low in a way that sporadic supplementation cannot replicate. Mechanism 4. The GLP-1 pathway. GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, is the exact hormone that drugs like semaglutide are engineered to mimic. Those medications cost hundreds of dollars a month. Okra stimulates GLP-1 production naturally. When okra's soluble fiber creates a viscous gel in the intestinal tract, it slows the movement of food through the gut. Glucose from a meal, instead of being absorbed quickly in the upper small intestine, gets pushed further down, deeper into the intestinal tract where the L cells that produce GLP-1 are concentrated. When nutrients reach those L cells, they release GLP-1 into the bloodstream. GLP-1 tells the pancreas to produce more insulin, tells the liver to stop releasing glucose, and slows gastric emptying so fullness lasts longer. This is the same biological pathway that pharmaceutical interventions are designed to activate. The drug produces a stronger, more sustained response, but the mechanism is identical. And in Nicoya, this GLP-1 stimulation was happening naturally at every meal containing okra, for generations, without side effects. A 2025 systematic review published in the International Journal of Food Sciences and Nutrition, analyzing 8 clinical studies with 521 participants, confirmed that okra consumption produced meaningful improvements in fasting blood glucose compared to placebo. The proposed mechanism was exactly this: increased chyme viscosity stimulating GLP-1 release. Mechanism 3. The enzyme blockade. There is a class of diabetes medications called alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. They block the enzyme responsible for breaking complex carbohydrates into simple glucose. Block the enzyme, slow the glucose release, lower the post-meal blood sugar spike. Okra does the same thing through its seed compounds. Researchers at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand identified 2 major flavanol glucosides in okra seeds, isoquercetin and quercetin 3-O-beta glucopyramidoside. These compounds selectively inhibited maltase and sucrase, 2 critical digestive enzymes. Isoquercetin was found to be 6 to 10 times more potent than related compounds. Okra's mucilage simultaneously inhibits alpha amylase, a different enzyme that works earlier in the digestive process, breaking down starch before it even reaches the glucosidase enzymes. 2 simultaneous enzyme blockades from the same vegetable. Upstream and downstream. A comprehensive review published in Phytotherapy Research in 2020 confirmed this dual mechanism. In the blue zone populations consuming okra daily, this enzyme blockade was operating at every carbohydrate-containing meal for decades, flattening the post-meal glucose spikes that drive vascular and nerve damage over time. Before Mechanism 2, if this is useful, subscribe to Longevity Code. Every week we decode 1 blue zone, 1 population, 1 system. Always peer-reviewed, always practical. Mechanism 2. The physical glucose trap. This mechanism is almost mechanical, not chemistry. Physics. The mucilage from okra forms a literal barrier inside the intestinal tract, a viscous gel between the glucose in your food and the absorptive surface of your intestinal lining. When viscosity increases, glucose diffusion decreases. The sugar molecules physically cannot reach the intestinal wall as quickly. They are trapped in a gel matrix. A study published in ISRM's Pharmaceutics confirmed this directly. The water-soluble fraction of okra significantly reduced glucose absorption through physical entrapment. Okra's mucilage contains rhamnogalacturonan, a type of pectin creating an unusually sustained viscous barrier, more durable than most soluble fiber supplements. Every time blood sugar exceeds certain thresholds after a meal, it actively damages the endothelial lining of blood vessels. The nerve damage, the vessel damage, the kidney damage, these are caused by the spikes, not the average. Flatten the spike and you protect the organs. This mechanism does exactly that at every meal, every day. Mechanism 1. The insulin sensitivity reset. This is the mechanism that makes everything else work better. And it is the reason her A1C dropped from 8.4 to 6.1. Type 2 diabetes is not primarily a sugar problem. It is an insulin signaling problem. The cells stop responding to insulin. Insulin is present, often in excess, but the cells will not answer. That is insulin resistance. Every other mechanism I have described today manages the consequences of that resistance. Mechanism number 1 addresses the resistance itself. A 2025 meta-analysis published in Phytotherapy Research confirmed that okra supplementation significantly reduced fasting blood glucose by an average of 21.7 milligrams per deciliter and reduced HbA1c by 0.42%. In clinical medicine, a reduction of 0.3% or more in HbA1c is considered clinically significant, the threshold where complication risk measurably decreases. Every 0.1% reduction reduces the risk of microvascular complications by roughly 10%. The mechanism involves okra's polyphenolic compounds, particularly the quercetin glycosides, modulating glucose transporter expression on cell surfaces, enhancing GLUT4 activity, and suppressing the inflammatory cascade that damages insulin receptor signaling. In plain terms, okra helps the cells answer when insulin knocks, not by flooding the system with more insulin, by repairing the signaling pathway damaged by years of chronic inflammation and high glucose. A 2023 double-blind placebo-controlled trial published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology gave type 2 diabetic patients 1,000 milligrams of okra 3 times daily for 3 months. Fasting blood glucose dropped. HbA1c improved. C-reactive protein went down. No adverse events. 3 months. A food-derived compound. Multiple metabolic improvements. 0 harm. This is why her doctor went quiet for 10 seconds. In 11 years of adjusting her metformin dosage, he had never seen the insulin signaling pathway repair itself, because nobody had ever suggested it could. Before the practical steps, one critical warning. Do not eat okra at the same time you take metformin. This is the most important practical point in this entire video. The same mucilage that physically traps glucose in your intestinal tract also physically traps metformin molecules, preventing them from being absorbed into your bloodstream. Research published in ISRN Pharmaceutics documented this directly. Blood glucose in subjects taking metformin with okra remains significantly higher than in those taking metformin alone. It is important to note that this interaction was demonstrated in animal studies, and human trials are still needed to confirm the same effect. However, given the strength of the mechanism, most practitioners recommend caution and advise separating the two by at least 2 to 3 hours. The solution is simple. Separate them by at least 2 to 3 hours. Morning okra with breakfast, metformin with lunch, or whatever schedule works for you, but never together. Discuss timing with your physician. What does this look like starting tomorrow? Start with 2 fresh okra pods daily. Slice into half-inch rounds. Saute in a tablespoon of olive oil for 5 minutes with turmeric and black pepper. If the texture is a problem, roast at 400 degrees for 20 minutes. It crisps completely, and you still get the seed compounds. By week 2, increase to 4 pods daily. Morning is ideal. It gives the mucilage time to coat the intestinal tract before your largest meals. Track your fasting glucose every morning. Write it down. The research shows meaningful changes appearing between 4 and 8 weeks. Not because you are masking a symptom, because you are beginning to rebuild a system. The centenarians of Nicoya were not running a 90-day protocol. They were eating the same vegetable their parents had always eaten, in soups and stews, alongside the black beans and corn tortillas that appear at every Nicoyan table. The biology reflected what the food delivered, consistently, without interruption, across an entire lifetime. Her doctor said it did not make sense. It made complete sense. It just required understanding a mechanism nobody had taught him. What has your experience been with managing blood sugar through food? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe to Longevity Code. Next week, another blue zone, another system, another mechanism traditional food cultures understood long before the clinical trials confirmed it. Always the science. Always something you can start this week.